Assalamu alaikum, friends, and welcome to a Muslim Mum podcast. Assalamu alaikum, my name is Farhat Amin, I'm your host, and welcome to season 2 of a Muslim Mum podcast. So what will we be talking about in the coming episodes? There's two issues that I'd like to focus on. One is questions that you have about Islam that your children have asked you and you haven't known how to answer them. And I think all of us face that kind of, that situation at different times. And I think would be nice. I wish I had been able to go to a resource that would help me with questions. And it's not just the questions that little kids ask us. I think it gets harder as our kids become older, once they reach the teen years. And so that's something. Now I have teenage kids, so I have been through all of that, and I'm also a high school teacher. Having said that, I'm in no way am I saying or putting myself forward as any kind of expert or perfect astaghfirullah example of motherhood, and I've made plenty of mistakes. But in a way, because I've made those mistakes, like I've said before, I want you guys to learn from my mistakes. So there are questions, and I think nowadays more than ever, our children are facing a lot of pressures to doubt Islam, to question Islam. And what I want to speak about to begin with, the reasons why our children are questioning Islam more than maybe we did when we were younger. And I'm in my 40s, so if anyone's in that age range, but for our children who are growing up now, I think it's a very difficult time for them. Having said that, I think there is definitely hope, and we should always have hope in Islam and hope in Allah that we can, get over this issue. There is a solution, and that those answers to those questions do come from the Quran and Sunnah. And so although it is an issue for us, but we face issues every day, the issue of what am I going to cook for dinner? How am I going to sort out my wardrobe? There's so many questions we have, and we just in the way we can find an answer to them. This isn't such a massive problem that we can't do something about it. And so that's one of the main things that I'll be speaking about in this season. And then also, I have been interviewing some mums that I think I really like what they're doing. And I think it's nice to hear, whether it's inspirational stories from other mums in our situation. And they're not super mums, they're not really famous either. So it's achievable. And it's just to give you and me ideas on if there's something I'd like to do, whether it's write a book, start a blog, change my career, ideas on raising kids. They're the kind of women, they're the kind of mums, normal mums, just like me and you, that I want to interview. Okay, so let's begin with what's causing Muslim teenagers to question Islam. That's what I'm going to speak about today. And this is a big topic, so I'm going to do this in parts. Now, you're like me, as a Muslim parent, we want to teach our kids about our deen. We do our best to create an Islamic atmosphere in our home. And, we send them to madrasa. We want to teach them to pray salah. We teach them to read Quran. These are all things, there's certain things that all of us are doing. Alhamdulillah, we are really trying our best. But then, there comes a point where our kids, as they get older, they go through puberty, they become more curious, they ask questions that they didn't, before they would accept the answers we were giving them, but now they're thinking more independently. So, they're kind of, they're pushing the boundaries a bit. So why, these are common things. Why do I have to study so much? I used to get it all the time. Why do I have my tidy room? The room smells. It's a bit of a pigsty, but they can't see, basic hygiene is a problem now. You need to clean your room up. Why do I need to clean my room? Why do I need to open the windows in my room? Okay, what's wrong with being on my phone till 1 a.m., 12 o'clock in the night? Again, these are the questions we get. Now, as well as that, that's everyday question. We get questions about Islam, and things like, I don't know, why do I have to wear hijab? Why do I have to fast during when it's exam time? They're looking at their other friends and thinking it's not fair. Why can't I sleep over at my non-Muslim friend's house? That's something I've definitely heard that from friends of mine, that their kids, they just don't get it. Why can't I do what every other normal kid does? Why is it that Islam is so strict and has so many rules? So these are all issues. I feel if you've had these questions, I really do feel for you. You are not alone, and you're not a bad parent for if you're in the situation, you don't know what to do. So, but now, okay, we get these questions, and I personally don't think it's a problem that our Muslim teenagers are asking these questions, that our kids are asking these questions. I think it's a problem when we can't give them a clear answer, which is based on Islam. I think that is, and because the thing is that if we're saying to them, okay, you can't go to that party at your friend's house, you can't wear a short skirt as part of your uniform to school, I don't want you to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, I don't think, if they may have a friend that's gay, or they've watched something on the TV where there's a homosexual relationship, and they're thinking, I don't think it's so bad. They love each other. What's wrong with that? Now, if we're now going to give them say to them, no, there is a problem, we should be able to explain why that is the issue in Islam. And I'm not saying here that we should be able to give reasons for everything. And this is something we'll look at a bit more deeply later, because sometimes there isn't a reason. And it's more to do, but what I am saying, so just as a very quick side point, someone might say, if we say to our children, we can't eat pigs because they're dirty. That's something I've heard. Parents give us a reason. Now then someone could say, well, what if the pig is really clean? It was raised in a laboratory, super clean. Can we eat it then? So that's just to illustrate every rule that Allah gives us. It doesn't have a reason. To be in the Quran, Allah says we can't, as Muslims, we can't eat pig is haram, and we don't know why. There's no reason given in Islam, in the Quran or Sunnah, why. That it's a matter of, do we obey our Creator or not? That's what it is. It's, do we submit without question to the rules and the laws? So that's just something to think about. Right, let's go on to now, how do some parents react, and how may me and you, have reacted to when we have been given asked difficult questions? Sometimes we get angry. Let's be honest. And the anger can come from, either we're thinking, I never asked my parents these questions, so why are you being so feisty and disrespectful to me and asking me these questions? It's the idea, how dare you question me? It's that idea. Or we can think, why are you questioning Islam? How dare you question Allah? How dare you question the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That can be our reaction. And let's just remember, anger comes from shaitan. Yeah, shaitan wants us to be angry. He wants to cause problems in families, to disrupt the family. And because what's that gonna, if we all get angry, I must admit, in your heart you may feel angry, and in a way that's not a bad thing to feel unhappy, but getting angry, and I have learned from experience, getting angry doesn't achieve anything. Yeah, so we're not going to get angry. Another way we can react is we end up giving a bit of a wishy-washy, unconvincing answer, because we just don't know how to answer it. But we think, I have to say something. I can't just say nothing. But again, I'd say let's not do that, because it's better to say, you know what, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. That doesn't decrease your how the kids view you, they'll actually respect you more, because you're saying, in the same way, when they have homework and they have to do research to find out the answers, that's what we say to our kids: go and find the answer out. You have to research it. That's what we're saying we're going to do. Now, the other third option that parents can do is we just give in, because we think, you know what, I have got so much on my plate, whether it's work, housework, just problems, my own problems going on in my life, and I just don't have the energy, the time, or the patience to deal with you and battle with you over everything. So fine, just go and do it. You want to go out, just come back at 9. You want to go out with your friends, or just don't take drugs. Well, there might be something we say, do this, but you know what, don't go so bad. And now, so all those 3 options, I would say none of them are right. None of them are right. None of them are healthy. None of them are good for your child. And they're not, in Islam, you're not doing Islam a justice by opting for any of those 3. So, now, before I can tackle the issue of, okay, how do we answer our kids' difficult questions about Islam, I want to look at what kind of environment have our kids been raised in. Now, I'm not judging. When I talk about this, I'm not passing judgment on you or on Muslim communities or on anyone. I'm just going to outline how I see the situation, our environment, and the kind of un-Islamic influences that our children, my children as well, remember that, my kids are raised in the UK, what kind of un-Islamic influences do they have in their lives? And I'm not scaremongering or trying to paint an overly negative image, but what I want to outline are the factors that are subtly chipping away at our kids' confidence in Islam. That's what I want. I really want. It's like I want to open all of our eyes up to look at where our kids are living and what they're having to go through. And so we need to, and so again, like I said, I don't want anyone to feel depressed or negative or think, oh my God, this is such a massive problem by listening to this podcast. I want us to just understand our situation so we can then do something with Allah's help, about this. And I'd just like to mention the hadith here. Anas ibn Malik reported, a man said, O Messenger of Allah, should I tie my camel and trust in Allah, or should I leave her untied and trust in Allah? The Prophet ﷺ said, tie her and trust in Allah. And that's reported in the book of Tirmidhi. So this is the attitude I have adopted, and I love you guys to really take on board as well, that when it comes to our kids, we're going to understand the situation that they're living in. So we're tying our camel, and then we're going to do dua, and we're going to do what we can in our control. Yeah, we're going to do our best, the best we can to help our kids. So, right, now, let's begin by looking at the reality of the liberal society that our kids are being raised in. And I'll explain what liberalism is. And basically, I'll just explain it here to us. So when your liberal society means, and that's all non-Muslim countries, it's liberalism. If you believe in liberty, it means that you, like morality, being good or bad as a human being, really depends on maximising freedom and maximising personal choice. And that's what the society, UK and US, that's the kind of society we live in, where the philosophers who came up with the idea of liberalism were atheists. And this was in England mainly, and in Europe. And what they say is that, it became this system of liberalism, it became the predominant system within Europe. It's like 18th and 19th century. And what they were saying was that really we don't need God in our lives. We can figure out what's right and wrong, and we will decide, that what is happiness? How do we define happiness? So we're living, and so from the countries that we all live in now in Europe and in America, we live in a liberal society that believes that people, decide how we should behave, what kind of, whether it's food, clothing, relationships, who we love, what we want to do with our time. People decide that. So that's what us and our kids, that's the kind of society that we're living in. Okay, so now let's think back a bit to when our parents, so whether it was our parents or our grandparents, when they first came to the UK, or to Europe or to US, when they came, they had choices to make, and that if they were going to live in this country, how are they going to survive? How are they going to get jobs? How are they going to face the racism that they all faced? How are they going to keep their Islam? And studies have been done on this, that when immigrants, and even nowadays, new immigrants to this country, Muslim immigrants, when they come to live in a non-Muslim country, they start to dampen down their cultural and their Islamic identity. And there are reasons why. I'm not blaming them for doing that. They do that to, as I said, to be able to work, to be able to raise their families. So now one of the areas that they begin to dampen down is language. So, for example, they learn English, well, some of them do, which is a good thing. But in general, their children usually, this is the children of immigrants, so our grandparents and parents, their children usually don't speak their mother tongue in public. Most often, children can understand their parents' mother tongue, but cannot speak it fluently. So as an example, my family, my parents both spoke Urdu and English. That's because they went to university in Pakistan. They made sure I knew Urdu, and they would speak to me in Urdu. I would sometimes speak to them in Urdu back, but I would speak back to them mainly in English because I was going to school in England now. So now when me and my husband had our kids, now we then both speak to each other in English. And so our kids, their first language is English. So they have lost the connection to Urdu. And although, now someone could say, big deal, so what? Can't speak Urdu. But what we need to remember is there is a connection, your parents' mother tongue, there's a connection to your cultural heritage. And our cultural heritage includes Islam. So when I would go back to Pakistan for holiday, I would feel a connection to my family. The fact that I could speak Urdu I then would pick up Urdu quite quickly. I'd forget my confidence in Urdu. So that meant I could speak to my uncles and aunties and my cousins. My grandparents passed away. But there was a connection, and that connection definitely had a foundation in Islam. But the thing that connected me was because I could speak Urdu to my Muslim relatives. Yeah. And I know it had a big impact on me not feeling English and not feeling so, and it made me feel, knowing Urdu made me feel Muslim. I don't know if you guys have had the same experience. You can let me know. By the way, anyway, you can contact me by email. It's info at farhatamin.com. That's info at farhatamin.com. So I'd love to know what you think about what I'm saying. Okay, so now one good thing here though is this trend amongst children is usually reversed if their mother was born in a Muslim country, in a non-English speaking country, or they live with their grandparents who then speak to them in their heritage language. Now it's interesting, there's in the blog post that I've got connected to this podcast, I've got down, there are some links to studies which illustrate what I'm saying. So you can have a look at that if you go to my blog. Right, okay, so let's just moving on. So, okay, one of the things that is lost, so language. Second thing, cultural clothing. So things like shalwar kameez, the hijab, or in Arabic sometimes the khimar and the abaya or the jilbab, saris, kurtas, etc. These are all when our grandparents and parents come here, they begin to slowly swap those clothes for just neutral clothing, so trousers, shirts, dresses, anything that doesn't make them stand out. And so then what happens is culturally traditional clothes are reserved for weddings, Eid and funerals. We can observe that the older generation, who spent the majority of their lives in a Muslim country, continue to wear their traditional clothes. For example, grandparents do not adopt clothing they see as immodest and the clothes of non-Muslims. So now, again, think back to when you were younger. How comfortable did you feel wearing your traditional clothes to school? Maybe that was before non-uniform, uniforms. But even on the non-uniform day, would you go wearing your Indian, Asian, Pakistani, Arab clothing? I certainly didn't. Now let's think of for our kids then in public. Our kids, they adopt the view that they need to fit in as well. They don't want to look like they're, fresh off the boat. They desperately want to fit in. And, it's interesting that Americans and Europeans, they'll think it's so exotic and quaint to wear Indian clothes, or I know there's different types. You'll notice in fashion they'll have like influences of Indian clothing or Moroccan prints, and they think it's so cool and hipster to do that every now and again. But for the people who are, so for a Moroccan, for a Indian to then wear a sari to work, or whatever is the clothing that someone wants to wear to work, that isn't seen as acceptable. It's seen as, no, you need to wear what we wear. We don't want you showing your identity too much. And again, in the blog, I've got an interesting link to something a young girl wrote about this. So again, if you think of why is cultural clothing important? Again, if our kids, they feel comfortable wearing, what kind of clothes do your average teenager in the UK and US wear? It's tight clothes, girls and boys. It's short tops. It's, again, short skirts. It's sleeveless. It's basically not modest at all. It's stuff with whether it's rude images or rude words on the t-shirts. It's, and it's very provocative for girls at the moment. I'm not sure is there provocative clothing for boys? I don't know. Maybe really tight jeans, that's provocative. But again, they're swapping in their mind. They've seen their grandparents and parents adopt clothing to fit in, and then they do the same as well. So we can't, when we say to our kids, we want you to wear more modest clothing, or we don't want you wearing those tight jeans, I think we do have to think, well, what are we wearing? What message are we giving to them? Yeah, no, now, again, I'm not judging you here, but I'm giving you advice, sincere advice. And, one of the reasons why I started this podcast was based on the teachings of Surah Asr, that if we look at, Allah says in Surah Asr that, I'm just bringing it up, I don't want to quote it incorrectly. Here we go. That by time the human being is in loss, except those who believe and do good works and encourage truth and recommend patience. So what I'm doing, when I say things, I'm basing on that. I want us to believe, I want us to all do good works, and we need to encourage each other to follow Islam, to obey Allah. So I'm not judging anyone here, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. Okay, so let's just move on now. The other big thing that our kids face, and they've seen, is that when their parents and grandparents came here, they lose their as part of their religious identity, especially the public. Now, every Western country is secular, and what this means is religion is seen to be a personal matter, and it should not impact on public life. Government should not religion shouldn't affect government policy, and everyone can practice whatever religion they want at home, but it shouldn't affect public life. So in the UK and European countries, we can observe a large proportion of people are not openly religious. And I've got I've got another link to some data carried out by the Office for National Statistics. And what it says here is, according to the data, the number of Brits who say they have no religion has increased by 46% over the last 7 years. That makes non-religious people the fastest growing group in the country. So, and I think we can all see this. I think US is different because there is, they can be quite, you'll get areas which are very evangelical, very pro-religion. But in the UK, church attendance is definitely going down. You have churches closing down because no one's going there. And the one thing you notice, people don't openly talk about their religious views. It's not something you talk about. They're not overtly religious. So religion is very personal. So when first generation Muslim immigrants live in a secular society, obviously they're affected by this mentality and dampen down their religious identity in public. However, what we can observe for Muslims anyway is that they do their best to keep their religious identity at home, which alhamdulillah is a brilliant thing. So that's what I want. They're the three factors. So you've got loss of language, our cultural language, you've got our cultural clothing gets swapped, and our religious identity, we start to dampen it down. Now, some people, let's just look at Muslim countries for a second. We in Muslim majority countries, there is more support to encourage maintenance of Islamic faith and practice. There's a stronger Islamic atmosphere because of the mosques we have, the religious education, religious holidays being celebrated communally. Offices and shops change their hours during Ramadan. There's Jummah, which is a day off for everyone. You've also got the strong family bonds because you've got extended family or families living nearby, and they take care of each other. The kids see more positive examples around them, and they're learning their language. They dress more modestly overall, and the overall effect is that they feel more comfortable and confident about being Muslim. Now, I'm not saying Muslim societies are perfect, not at all. And, we can just see there's no Muslim country that rules by Islam, obeys Allah's, has a political system which is Islam, based on Islam. None of them do. Not Saudi, not Pakistan, not Iran. So I'm not saying they're perfect, but what we can see is overall Muslim teenagers raised in Muslim countries are proud of their cultural and Islamic heritage. So I'm not going to go into I'm going to end it here really, because I think what I've said is quite a lot to think about, and I'd really like you to let me know what you think of what I've said so far, and just ponder over. Look, this is what our children, and even us really, that we are growing up in this environment where our, Islam is not in our society. It's not on the TV. It's not we are not being encouraged. No one is encouraging us, from the non-Muslim society we're living in, to follow Islam. So our kids, I think it's inevitable that our kids then are not feeling so confident. Now, you may say straight away to me that, hold on, but we can see there are more Muslim women and girls wearing hijab, wearing a scarf on their head. We've got lots of mosques in the UK. We have halal meat. You can go to areas, I can name them, Walthamstow in London, Birmingham, Bradford, Leicester, where there are large Muslim communities and there's a lot of good going on there. And what I would say to you is, you are completely right. Yes, there are. And I think, and there's a lot of good work happening that to maintain the faith of Muslim kids and ourselves and people, because alhamdulillah, people realise when you come here, you can't just leave. We have to do something. We have to build mosques. We have to educate our kids. We have to have Islamic schools. Alhamdulillah. And I say alhamdulillah to all of that. But what I'm, even despite having those things, and that I think those things are helping, definitely helping, us as parents, we need to realise our kids are going through, it's not easy for them. And so we need to, before we can think of solutions, what we can do, let's just take a bit of time to understand the environment and maybe think about what I've said, that am I in my home and even in, like for example, I'm not, you can't turn the clock back and suddenly teach your kids Urdu or Bengali or things like that. If you have done those things, then well done you, alhamdulillah, good for you, and keep it up. But maybe think of, the connections that, how can I connect my children to their grandparents' language so they can speak to their grandparents? Yeah, how much of a connection do they have to their relatives back home? Yeah, and I know, alhamdulillah, a lot of us are really good that we will take our kids back home. But, there should be how, as far as their religious identity and our religious identity, how that's something for you to think, how strong is that? And are you and am I giving our kids, what are we doing to preserve their religious identity? That's something that to ponder over. Okay, so inshallah, the following podcast, I'm going to speak about other factors, in particular, what kind how friends influence our children, how living in an area where there aren't that many Muslims, what effect does that have? Also, what kind, the effect of the media and the kind of news and headlines our kids are hearing. And then also, I'm going to talk more about liberalism and liberal ideas and how they are affecting us. Okay, so inshallah, my website is farhatamin.com. Inshallah, I would genuinely love to know what you think about what I've said. And if there are any topics that you would like me to discuss, then please get in touch by email. Okay then, Assalamu alaikum, take care.